S.S.S. Korach, Tov Shin, Pei Vav. First thing I want to do is we had a beautiful surprise here tonight. The founder of this year, Yosef Marapuro, walked in on us here. Baruch Hashem came here for a simcha from Ramat Beit Shemesh, from Eretz Yisrael. And there's a couple of very big things we want to tell him. Number one is we want to wish him a mazel tov. And not that he should come back here for simchas, we should all be there for simchas, but we should join. You should make many, many more simchas in your family, many, many more grandchildren, great-grandchildren, in the best of health. And the second thing we want to tell you is that we feel bad for you, that you have to read Parshas Korach twice. In Eretz Yisrael, they learned about Parshas Korach last week. And those, if you come into Chutz La'aretz this week, you read Parshas Korach once again. So you can read about, if it was tough to understand it this week, maybe we'll be able to touch a little bit upon what happened with Korach, this entire episode of Korach. And when we think about what happened to Korach and all those people that were with Korach, so many different things, we have so many different things to wonder about and to explain. So much of it is hard to comprehend, almost makes no sense. And really, the common answer to most of the questions that people ask about this week's Parsha, how is it possible that the young children went down with Korach? Why was it that all his belongings and everything, what's going on over here? Why? So the most common answer that's given to almost every one of those questions, the answer is yes. Machloikas can cause all of that. And right away, that should, we can almost close up here. And that's the answer, the most definitive answer to anything, any question that you have on the beginning of this week's Parsha, is that yes, Machloikas can cause all those things to happen. It is that bad. And it can cause destruction to everyone, to all those who are involved in the Machloikas, up to the point that you cannot even touch the belongings of Korach, which we're going to have to explain a little bit what that was all about, but up to the point where Korach's nechasim, his belongings, nobody was allowed to touch it at all. And all the possessions of these people had to go down with them. And for those of you who maybe are not a little familiar, Korach caused, and we do have people all over the world, different levels of knowledge in the Parsha, so let me just give a little background, that Korach went ahead and caused the Machloikas. He challenged the leadership of Moshe Rabbeinu. Korach felt that yes, Moshe Rabbeinu may have been great, and Moshe Rabbeinu was everything, but there are other important people, and Korach was ready to challenge, unbelievably, to challenge the leadership of Moshe Rabbeinu, who had taken them out of Mitzrayim, done the Makkos, and whatever else Moshe Rabbeinu did, Kriyas Yamta, whatever, all the Nisim that they saw already, Korach was ready to challenge that. And when Korach got punished, you weren't even allowed to touch his possessions. And as we mentioned at the beginning of this year, that even young children, you'd have a child who's a day old, he went down with Korach. So right away, we start to think about, how do we understand this? So Nesivos Shalom actually tells us that it was like the air all around was infectious. So when the air is infectious, it doesn't discriminate on age and who you are and what your yichus is and whatever. So when you're in the environment, and this is an important lesson for all of us to know, if you're in the room, if you're in the neighborhood, if you're in the shul, if you're in the environment where there's machloikas going on and you have some shaykhis, you better run. You better get out of this. Chazal tell us that even a small, you talk about the belongings. So when you think about Korach's belongings going down with him, you think about maybe his couch, his dining room table. I don't know what they had in the midbar, they had in their tents. But you think of all these chashuv belongings. Chazal tell us that if there was a sewing needle, which is extremely, extremely small, insignificant, and cheap, you had a sewing needle that belonged to one of these people, that also went down and was buried along with Korach v'chol adosei. It rolled to the place and it was swallowed up by the earth with the people that went down with Korach. So really, as we mentioned, it's very, very difficult to understand all this, especially when we say that young children, we know that children are not responsible up to a certain age for averos, for serious averos, for things that they do. Children, they're not responsible for what this. So why is it? So Nesivos Shalom explains along the lines that we said that there was the infectious disease of machlokes. And as we mentioned, infectious diseases, because of course the children were not being punished. We know that children, certain averos till the age of 13, other things, B'dei Shamayim till the age of 20. A person is not, I know everybody here, we have people here under that age, you all consider yourselves grown up and chashuv already. Of course you are, but it just happens to be, you're not responsible for all of these, for everything until you're 20 years old. But if there's an infectious disease there, if something has infected the air, it doesn't matter what your age is. So it wasn't begeder and oynish. Everything around Korach was now infected with a disease known as machlokes. That's what it was. And it was actually now usher to touch anything that was around Korach. And then, we used to not be able to identify with these concepts. But everybody remembers just a short time ago, 6 years ago, when we had COVID, so everybody, if you don't want to be in the same room, you have to remember to stand outside. If you're in the same room, you touch anything, disinfect it, whatever it was. So now we do have a concept. We understand that everything that belonged to Korach had to go. Otherwise, other people might get sick. Other people might get infected too. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't want it to spread any further. He wanted to contain it where it was right now. So the babies had to go down too, not as a punishment, because of Ada they didn't sin, they didn't do an Avera, but the Ruach of the Machlokes had affected them too, and Hashem said, that's it. They have to, everything, we want to end the pandemic, whatever it was, we want to end that there. So the Nesivos Shalom tells us that the Torah speaks about this episode of Korach at length to teach us, the Nesivos Shalom tells us to teach us this lesson, dafka, this lesson, this point of how severe being involved in a machlokes actually is, especially when a machlokes is caused with a rebbe or a rebbe, somebody that's a leader of Klal Yisrael. That's something you don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. So it's mamela. We know it's terrible to be involved in any machlokes, but to be in a machlokes with someone who's a leader in Klal Yisrael, you're treading on very, very, very dangerous ground. And that was the case with Moshe Rabbeinu and Korach. Korach was not just involved in a machlokes, but he was going after the leader of all leaders, the greatest leader to ever live in Klal Yisrael. That's a very, very dangerous proposition, and it should really make us think about, somehow we excuse ourselves, and Nesivos Shalom talks about it. We excuse ourselves when we feel that no, it's someone and we have a machlokes with someone in the family, someone in your yeshiva, someone in your workplace, and you justify it with 20 different. We're all big lamdonim, once you learn Baba Mitzia, Baba Basra, you already know how to make with your thumb like this, that this person doesn't count. It's a mitzvah to bury this person. Meantime, Hashem turns it around and says the person that caused the machlokes and involved with it, that's the person that gets buried. But we all feel that it's a mitzvah and that this person, the neighborhood, no, we have to make this, we have this against them, that against them. And people are encouraging you that how could you just sit there on the sidelines? You have to take a side. You have to stand for something. So the Chafetz Chaim, we know, not brought down in the Nesivos Shalom, but I'm just mentioning the Chafetz Chaim, when he talks about machlokes, he uses a mashal, Chafetz Chaim talks about like fire. That machlokes is like fire. Reb Chaim Shmulevitz actually said, I'm just remembering now, something Reb Chaim Shmulevitz says, that it's fire, and fire is a metzias. There's no such thing as not getting burned from fire. You're going to get burned. And this is what the Torah is telling us in this week's parsha, that if a person cares about themselves, if you care about yourself, if you care about your life, if you care about your parnasa, your livelihood, if you care about your family, if you hear about a machlokes, don't just pick yourself up and walk away, but run the other way. The Torah tells us, Uvenei Korach loy mesu. The children of Korach didn't die. Many of people, as we know, 250, a large group of people around Korach did die. And not only that, as we mentioned, his belongings went down and little babies went down, but Uvenei Korach loy mesu. You know why? Because they did something that every one of us should do when we hear about machlokes. Think for a second. They had second thoughts about what their father was actually doing. They had second thoughts, and they thought about it, and the conclusion they came up with is Moshe emes v'Seirasa emes. That no, we cannot go against the leader of Klal Yisrael. Yes, there are halachas of kibbud av v'em, there's halachas of respecting parents and elders and this, but when it comes to machlokes, it's also min ha-Torah. You are not allowed to believe. They had second thoughts, Moshe emes v'Seirasa emes instead, and they saved themselves. They saved their lives. And we can learn from here, Nesivos Shalom, who always gives big confidence, and he says, this is one of the scariest episodes, it's one of the scariest lessons in the Torah, because who doesn't have the challenge of being in, by machlokes we don't mean that there are fists flying and there are dishes flying out the windows. Machlokes could mean just words, and you move your nose and you get involved between two great people that might not agree with each other, and you stick your nose in, and the Nesivos Shalom tells us how scary that is, as we said, the repercussions of that, but Nesivos Shalom always gives confidence. He says, Mida Toiva Meruba. If the punishment for being involved in a machlokes is so great and so scary, imagine, as bad as machlokes is, if you step away and you walk away and you leave from a machlokes, as we know, Mida Toiva Meruba, how much more reward is you. The reward is always so much greater than chas v'sholom, a punishment. Mida Toiva Meruba, how a person could expect that, and sometimes, it's okay for you to say, you know what, Hashem, I had an opportunity today to be involved, get involved with different employees, different neighbors, different things, to listen to this piece of Lashon Hara and start up with this person, get involved with machlokes, and because I know it's usher and I have to get away, I'm walking away. You watch and see down the line what kind of rewards a person will get. Mida Toiva Meruba, the reward for such a thing is so great, and the Torah does not tell us stories. As we mentioned many times, the Torah is not saying stories of Korach. I mean, there are very interesting stories. This one happens not to end very well, but the Torah is not a storybook. The Torah is teaching us lessons. And as Nesivos Shalom always says, the lessons apply to every one of us. And we have to be honest with ourselves that when are we walking away? Are we running away from anything that just smells from machlokes? The lessons of avoiding machlokes are in this week's parsha. The costs of and respect and all the things that could happen as a result of being involved in a machlokes, the result of going against the Rebbe. All these lessons are in this week's parsha. Let's hope everybody will learn this lesson, the lesson of Parshas Korach, which our friend Yosef now is going to read twice this year, and I don't know if he'll stay in shul, but at least wherever he is, will read twice this year. So you have the double opportunity to learn, to run away from this machlokes. It should be a schus for everybody. Mida Toiva Meruba. Everyone should be zeicha to the rewards that we get for being oyev shalom, v'roidev shalom, and to run the other way from machlokes.